Good afternoon. It's an honour to be here and give you a snapshot of my fellowship. My love of the Sundarbans started in 1984 when I went out as a firebrand young biologist and actually learnt that it was all about people. So it's got a reputation for man-eating tigers, has saltwater crocodiles, snakes, pirates. A dangerous place to be. When I first went, the slogan was "Come before the tourists come," not difficult in a military dictatorship, and within 3 weeks out there, Indira Gandhi was shot. So sort of confirmed in my mind that people were much more dangerous than the tigers. But that also marked the decline of tigers and the crash of Project Tiger. So I really went in at the deep end, learnt an awful lot about this extraordinary forest, but not enough. And I worked there, sorry, I've got to, I worked there I worked on and off for 2 years there, and the tigers were so rare and so elusive. I had one sighting, a cub at night, and actually the pug marks, their tracks are what I followed. I had to track them, we had to find them, and learnt actually that while there was a bit of research done, it was all terribly inaccurate, and in one of the areas that we spent a lot of time that was supposed to have 15 tigers, there were 3. So population estimates were very dodgy. Life took me to other places. I thought this was one of the most interesting places to study tigers, because tigers and people, local people, depended so much on the forest, and so little was known about the tigers, and people were still living using age-old traditions of harvesting natural products. The Bay of Bengal, as I said, is just as important for fish and for people. Fishermen come from all over the place, from Myanmar, the Chittagong hill tracts, and these are people who live on the threshold of abject poverty, I would say, and coming into the forest to harvest various forest products is what actually enables them to survive and to even educate their children. So they're very well aware of the risks that they take when they come into the forest. Sundarbans actually means beautiful forest, and it is one of the most beautiful places I've been to. It is an extraordinary place. The forest floods twice a day. You have 3-meter tidal fluctuations. And it's very, very varied. You've got salinity gradients, spotted deer, even all over the Indian subcontinent, are one of the most beautiful deer you can see, and very, very important tiger food. So my fellowship enabled me to go back, and really the first 2 years I'd scratched the surface. And I was the first biologist to work there since 1971. And when in 1998 I read in a very reputable publication that tigers were thriving, and there was something like 500 tigers in the Sundarbans, without a single paper to prove it in the meantime, I thought I've got to go back. And luckily for me, there was an Indian subcontinent category, and I was extremely fortunate to be awarded the fellowship. This is when I really, really got to grips with what was going on in Sundarbans. A lot had changed in 14 years. There were tourists. The forest was beginning to experience deforestation and a lot of pressures. So although the tiger population was still there and more important than ever, and there, as you see, 1 minute you can be wading through up to your waist, then the tide goes down and you sink in up to your thighs in the mud. Just on the side there is a tiger kill, the remains of a tiger kill. Tiger tracks also, which have always been critical. During my fellowship, I actually managed to meet up with other biologists when I came back, and we actually pioneered the first footprint identification technique on tigers in the wild in Sundarbans, and that was thanks to the fellowship. Sundarbans is all about people. It is an extraordinary place for wildlife, but it was living with the people and understanding what it was like to live with a large predator that might eat you that really made me think enormously about what it truly is to live in harmony with your environment. As I said, they had wonderful boat building traditions, lived very, very simple, dangerous lives for about 4 months in the forest, and it starts young. Here's a young boy in a country boat. He's a woodcutter's son, and these 2 boys came in and lived seasonally for 4 months on an island called Dubla, where over 10,000 fishermen alone congregate and live, and the fish resources are extraordinary. And again, going back on my fellowship, we could see that fish stocks had absolutely crashed, and the sizes of the sharks being harvested had diminished by 1/3. So it was a pattern that things were changing in the Sundarbans. So the other part of it was getting to understand why tigers killed. Were they all man-eaters? And of course, it's a very different picture. Tigers do kill a lot of people there, but most of them are not from man-eating. So I went in to see this group of woodcutters whose one of their group had been killed by a tiger in that very spot here. And these poor men were terrified, and the tiger was coming back, and that was a man-eater. And trying to educate people there about not crouching on the ground, going out in groups. It's all very well, but when you've got a man-eater, I personally think that they should be shot and removed, but it was trying to persuade local authorities. It's an interesting place also culturally. Hindu and Muslim pray to the same gods. Bum Bibi is very important. You all go and do your puja to her, otherwise you don't stand a chance in there. When I went back for the Churchill Fellowship, I also I helped make a film called In Search of Man-Eaters. Of course, people are only interested in the sensationalism aspect of it, but the interesting thing was that this was the beginning of a phase of research, bringing in outside agencies, the beginning of the Sundarban Biodiversity Initiative, and so for the first time we were getting good maps, and I went out there I was recording not just pug marks, but also recording bird calls, and we were actually monitoring them to try and document. All right, I've got to go very fast, 3 minutes, to try and document how things have changed. We got the first camera track photos of tigers, and again, got much more involved with local people and their relationships to tigers. One of the most extraordinary things that happened was really I got to know some of the tiger victims, and this man had survived a tiger attack, so that wasn't a man-eater, that was just an opportunistic going into tiger's habitat and the unfortunate side effects, whereas this woman had lost her husband to a man-eater, and yet both these people who depended on the forest said to me, I said, well, what do you feel about tigers? Would you be happy if they were removed? And they said, no, please, without the tiger we have no forest, because VIPs and corruption and logging and all these things were the things that would affect their livelihood. And so they said to us, we choose to go into the forest. It is the tiger's home, and that is extraordinarily humbling. So these people were asking a solution. These people were actually living on the ground in boats where a tiger could walk onto in one of the hot spots of tiger areas, collecting sungrass. And actually I lived with these people, and there are absolutely no known tiger attacks in this area, very undisturbed. And yet further up in the forest where deforestation was happening, I witnessed tigers killed, most of them starving and emaciated, going into the villages, and people just prodding them and being the results, increasing human-tiger conflict. So my first visit there really made me realize that conservation is all about people, although I'm a wildlife behaviorist at source. And if you really couldn't, it was the people that mattered. Why did I care? It was for the people. These otter fishermen who've caught otters for centuries from the rivers and used them to help them fish, again, knew the forest really well, and none of them had experienced any problems with the tigers. So I want to leave you really with the importance that the tigers on their own mean nothing. They're beautiful, they're charismatic, they excite people, but the fact is that if you protect the tiger, you protect the forest, you protect the whole environment. And it's a way of getting the people to benefit from this with ecotourism and sustainable livelihoods that's motivated me ever since. And my work has gone on to do that and with other species, but I want to leave you with the voice of the tiger. If I can click the icon. So this is the sound of the forest at night, and apart from being one of the most exciting sounds in the world, you can actually... So when you're in a hide or in a boat, living like the local people do, and you hear that, your heart just thumps. And it took about 18 months to get that recording. So thank you very much.